Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon and welcome to another of our Webinar Wednesdays, hosted by the California State University Bakersfield Small Business Development Center. Thank you for joining us for number 268 in our webinar series. Good afternoon, I'm Kelly Bearden. I'll be your host today. Got a great special guest coming in to talk about a very, very fascinating topic. Very current topic, what's going on with ChatGPT and other AI chat boxes. So let's get going. Next week, we're going to be getting into the disaster situation, what is to be expected out of a lot of this March flooding, a lot of the programs that might be coming, a lot of the programs that are up now. And we'll be joined next week by Don Golick, the SBA director for the Fresno district, and also Jeff Simpson, who is the Mono County Economic Development Director. So what is up today, March 22nd? Well, today we have a lot as far as disaster loan update goes, as far as the rain and the snow continues to fall and the reservoirs are filling and the damage that it is leaving behind, both physical and economic injury. We'll talk a little bit about that. Going to really focus on that next week, but today our focus is going to be on artificial intelligence. It is here, and the ChatGPT chatbot is all the rage, and we're going to look at ways it can help your business. Also up today, March 22nd, is our Capital Quarter. Our weekly look at accessing capital has a lot of range today, going all the way from the disaster front to some grants, and also we're going to talk about the annual percentage rate on some particular deals. So we're going to look a little bit about some of the things, and everything seems to be happening on a daily basis this week on AI. So we'll look at a few more things in that area. We will also have our economic corner on the rate hike, which was all of 0.25%. It was affected by the recent bank failures, and talk briefly on that today. We'll look at our key relief programs that are going. We'll have all the news and information for you in 2023. All here on our weekly Webinar Wednesday. And as always, your questions, please put your questions in the Q&A box today. Maureen will be putting, our producer, Maureen Busher-Dang, will be putting a lot of resources in the chat box. We'll have a poll, kind of a unique, different poll today, a first for Webinar Wednesday. We're going to call it our faux poll. And with that, let's move along. Keep you in a little suspense about that faux poll, huh? So let's talk about some of the key local relief programs that are open. Last week was the last week to get in with physical damage for FEMA purposes for the storms that affected us from December 27th of last year till January 31st, 2023. That is now closed. The economic injury component of that same period of storms is open, and is open until October. And we'll talk a little bit more about this because there could be some strategy involved in when to apply, how to apply, and what periods, and some of the information that you're going to need to know. Going back all the way to the last time we had a economic injury disaster loan being the COVID. So we will also talk about the storm damage that is occurring now in February and March. A lot of damage going on, a lot of different places throughout the state that are impacted. That is still being evaluated. There has not been a separate declaration out for that. Some of you may need a separate declaration. I think many of you can get by under the EIDL, under the previous. A lot of this will be discussed next week, but a little bit more later in today. Our Kern County Micro Grant Program is open for a limited time. It is ending soon. And give you a quick thing to on that. We'll be talking in the near future about our City of Bakersfield Entrepreneurship Program that is coming with grants for certain census tracts throughout the City of Bakersfield. The California Dream Fund. Hopefully, we're going to be rolling out a second version of this very successful program out of the Office of the Small Business Advocate. We should know by June. Also, the State Small Business Credit Initiative, SBCCI, or that's SSBCI. You know, it's one of my favorite or least favorite acronyms going these days, but they have a number of loans that are available, and loans that are available to small businesses to help them grow, and some very good loans. And also coming soon should be an underserved venture capital component of that, where they're going to fund $200 million to underfunded venture capital groups, maybe not underfunded, but they're going to definitely serve underserved members of our community, be that rural veterans, people of color, and many, many others. And then our employee retention credit has been opened. It's been opened retroactively for 2020 and 2021. It requires an amended tax return. Please talk to your tax professional if you have not done that yet. So let's talk a little bit about some of the storm relief for California businesses. Our property for the main counties that were damaged in the earlier weather from, we'll call it December and January, closed last week, and that covered 14 counties. It continued to grow. So those are the primary counties as identified by SBA. So those are only good for property damage and also for economic injury. But really, if you're outside of those and had property damage, you were not covered by that initial flood for that period. So the counties that are secondary counties, they're the ones that are adjacent or contiguous to those counties, can apply for the economic injury disaster loan. So keep that in mind, and we'll continue to talk a little bit more about that as we go on today. But those are the 14 counties that were affected by the primary flooding, mudslides, and landslides that ended the end of February, or excuse me, January. Now, beginning in February, we started having more, and obviously March has been kind of as I continue to see weather out on the horizon, we continue to see damage that is occurring. So as of March 6th, SBA topped over $50 million in assistance, and you'll note that most of that was to residents. Disaster loan is the only program that SBA does make loans to individuals rather than to individuals opening or operating a small business. And as you see, nearly 86% of that did go to people with damage to their residence. So interesting to know. And so let's move to Economic Corner for a second. So just a really quick Economic Corner today with so much going on in other areas. When I fixed this slide, I didn't know what the rate hike was going to be, but yes, there is a rate hike today. So if you have an SBA variable loan rate or some other variable car rate or some other form of home loan that is tied to a variable rate, it likely went up 0.25% today. So the pressure was on the Fed to kind of tamp that down because of the bank failures that were occurring. Silicon Valley Bank and others failed, and it seemed like some of that failure was because of rising interest rates. So whereas the Fed has said they were going to continue to raise rates until they could drive inflation down from where it is now at 6% down to 2%, they did it with a very, very minimal hike today. They had been talking 0.5 point, 0.75 points before that occurred with the bank issues, but with that, they decided to kind of ramp that down. So what is this with our bank failures and our bank runs that have occurred from Silicon Valley Bank? It is really kind of a lesson for us in liquidity, in holding a lot of our assets that can be converted quickly to cash. You talk to bankers and they love liquidity financial ratios, and have ratios like the quick ratio and how quickly you can convert your assets into cash. And for Silicon Valley Bank, that was what really did them in, is that once the bank run started, and they did have losses because they bought more longer term maturity bonds, your 10-year treasury bonds. And when interest rates went up, those bond yields went down and the value of those sunk to where they lost money on that. And it wasn't easily able to convert in order to avoid the bank run that started. So really kind of the key on all this today is only 0.25% hike today. Many were expecting a little bit more, some anticipating no hike at all. So on to our capital quarter and what's happening in our access to capital. Well, let's start with SBA disaster loans. we talk about the EIDL program. And I think everybody got a pretty good dose of EIDL, at least on Webinar Wednesday, during those 138 consecutive weeks we were on during the pandemic. And during that time, EIDL was discussed so often, many weeks, so often that I can't even remember some of the key components of it. Now, maybe that's an old brain or just maybe information overload. But we do know now that disaster loans are up to $2 million, not that 200,000. So I needed another zero in there, but it's up to 2 million or 200,000 for homeowners. That's correct. 2 million for businesses. See what I'm talking about? Eligible for $40,000 to repair or replace damage of the property. There's your interest rates that are available. Very low rates by today's standards. There's my 2 million. Yes, 2 million for businesses of all size, nonprofits, etc., up to 2 million for a variety of different uses and damages. The one thing that's really nice about this program is they're look also to give you money to avoid this problem in the future, and actually will loan you amounts to make repairs and improvements that will protect or minimize the same type of damage later on. So that's really something I think from a resilience standpoint that really, if you're in an area to where you have had continually disasters happen, from flooding, from slides, and there's some work that you can do, now's the opportunity to do that. And for small businesses, most of those are the economic injury disaster loans that we're going to be working with. And there's a lot of continuity moving forward on the EIDL program. And recall that the EIDL program is designed to meet your working capital needs during that loss period. It isn't an insurance policy to protect the sales that you've lost. It basically covers the working capital needs. So really, one of the big determinants of that is gross profit. And we've always identified gross profit as your sales minus your cost of sales. And that is really one of the key determinants that SBA uses in determining the size of your EIDL award. So the one key thing also is that it could be indeterminable at this time. You might not know what your economic injury disaster loan is going to need to be. Right now, we're only in March, and it could be maybe May or June before you get back to where you're not being impacted by the disaster. It could be later in the year. So I think really the best thing to do is to tune in next week when we have our disaster show next week with Jeff Simpson, Don Golick, and Don is going to really, I'm going to defer and say when is going to be the best time to file. And what I'm talking about in that statement is that you might file now for disaster that has occurred going back to December 27th. But is that going to be the easiest way if you anticipate your loss to continue till June, September, or even December of this year? So also during this loss period, FEMA did, as of yesterday, they did $32 million. They did a lot of this is grants. It's total housing assistance. Some of it is loans where they will make loans based on your insurance policy to provide you money while your insurance policy is being worked out. So you have total housing assistance dollars that were approved and also other dollars approved. So about $35 million of FEMA dollars went into this last disaster that is now, the physical damage aspect is over. So what about the February, March weather effects? Last time I checked, which was last week, the governor had proclaimed 38 counties to be kind of under a state of emergency. We are actually actively encouraging people that have damages, particularly physical damage to their property, to contact the local county EOS, the Office of Emergency Services in your county. What is happening now is there is a collection being done. There is an effort to try to document what's going on so the state and the feds can come in and understand the loss. That's how these disaster programs work. Once they understand the loss and determine the scope of the disaster, they will come in and then actually figure out if the disaster actually occurred, if it is going to be an SBA, if it's going to be FEMA, etc. What we're finding out is much of this damage is not visible, particularly on the Eastern Sierra and also along the Western Sierra as well, where there's been large amounts of snowfall that is just now starting to melt in many communities. And some communities, it's not melting and won't melt soon. So it cannot be determined. So a lot of these variables are still kind of what is impacting the future and the scope of this disaster that is going on now. Okay, one thing I just wanted to touch on for a moment here, and is going to be the source of our FA poll question today. I want you to just kind of look at some of these numbers, and there's kind of some misconceptions that go on with annual percentage rate. And oftentimes during the week, I'm contacted by one or two clients that come up to me and say, hey, I'm having an issue with Fintech. And what I want you to do is I just want you to start looking at some of the numbers. And this is how generally you get a loan from a Fintech, a financial technology company over the internet, and they will approve very quickly. And there's some cases Fintech is very good, but some cases that it is quite high. For this example that I learned about this week, they were offered a $56,000 loan with $23,566. So there's our formula for calculating that, just based on those numbers, and those fees are added to the loan. So you pay back $79,000. What would that APR be? And just real quickly, think of a percentage yourself. Our faux poll is, there it is right there, 50.878%. So I'm saying if you guessed between 40 and 60, you received a correct answer for this particular poll question. Congratulations. If you have this particular loan, we'll talk a little bit more on it moving forward in the next few weeks. Our Kern County micro grant program is still open, $2,500 for small businesses, a variety of factors. Your main source of income, and you could not have had it over $50,000 in sales. Last week, our webinar, we had a fantastic presentation from the Claytons, Morgan and Tasha, and they talked about their leadership transition plan, and they made that actually public for us as far as the transition goes, as far as the document, as far as the planning process. Now, what you're going to get is the sample rather than their entire plan, but the 23-page leadership transition plan, we do have it at the SBDC, and you can email me for a copy of that. We are adding that this week, the Clayton Leadership Transition Plan, to our SBDC toolbox, along with other tools that we utilize, including our YouTube channel that has all of our webinars, Live Plan, the Live Plan business planning software, our SBDC Net information for demographics and a lot of other market research and planning, and our cash flow forecast. Quickly, what's going on in the communities? We have the Women's Business Conference that's coming up the last week of April. Also, the Kern County Economic Summit, hosted and presented by Cal State University Bakersfield and a couple of other partners. We have an HR resource that we've added. We will be checking this out. It's a multiple regional. The employment training resource made that available to us. And I really want to check this out in the next coming weeks. And maybe we can add that to our toolbox. Also, we have our Jimmy Zhu. He's actually looking for businesses that might want to work with them on some SEO and Google ad projects, marketing. They might be all done with that, but it's something that the marketing department through the School of Business and Public Administration. So real quickly, all about AI is the rest of this presentation, and some of the things that I heard this week happening is GM plans to integrate it into its vehicles. Google is now launching their AI product as of this week called Bard. It will not integrate into their Google search. Earlier, the Chinese internet company introduced Ernie. And also Bill Gates posted just today about AI. Bill Gates is one of the partners on OpenAI that will be discussed today, along with other things. And a couple of the quotes from his blog. The development of AI is as fundamental as the creation of the microprocessor, the personal computer, the internet, and the mobile phone. So really up there with the greatest accomplishments of the last half century. Entire industries will reorient around it. Businesses will distinguish themselves by how well they use it. He went on to say it will free people up to do things software will never do, teaching, caring for patients, supporting the elderly. I'm a fan of that. And also help scientists, help students teach math, learn math, and replace jobs in task-oriented fields like sales and accounting. So that brings us to our special guest today, and our special guest is Justin Powers. He's the owner and founder of Kernville Cowork, a co-working space located in the heart of the Kern River Valley, where members and visitors have fallen in love with what they call work where you play. I've known Justin for a number of years as I venture off here. I knew him before he had that beard, but he does have one of the 3 greatest beards, I'd say, in Kern County, along maybe with Jim Keeler and maybe someone else. But he has over a decade of experience in web development. Justin's worked with companies like Salesforce.com, a big fancy building in San Francisco. He's worked with several tech startups before launching Kern Cowork. He has an expertise in Ruby's and ability to optimize workflows and allow them to help development team realize their potentials, build features that meet the needs of customers. In addition to his work in web development, Justin has been studying machine learning for years and is excited about the potential of chatbot technology to help small businesses grow. Understanding of chatbots can be used for a variety of purposes: brainstorm, build structure, and business plan. And of course, this makes him the ideal speaker for today. Justin, thank you for joining us. Take it away.
Thanks, Kelly. If I'd known you were going to read the whole bio, I would have made it twice as long. That was pretty fun. So everybody can hear me all right, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So let me switch over to this. So I titled this little presentation, using AI chatbots to level up your business, or how I learned to stop worrying and love the bot. That's a Dr. Strangelove reference for anybody with eclectic or older movie tastes. I did include a slide with the bio. I'm not going to make anybody read it again. I'm not going to read it again. But pay attention to the last sentence there. This bio was written with the assistance of chatbot technology. I'll show you at the end kind of my strategy for using tools like OpenAI's ChatGPT to create content like this. But this is just kind of an example of what's available. I took what the AI tool provided, I made some light edits, and that's what you see here. We don't really have time to get into what is AI, what are all the different components, what are all the different types of AI, but just at a really high level, I just want to just set some definitions out there. When we're talking about AI, that means artificial intelligence, which is the ability of machines to perform tasks that normally require humans to do. That could be a lot of different types of things. It's a very broad term. There's a lot of different technologies that fall under that broad banner of AI. But what I'm going to focus on today is specifically chatbots. And again, even under chatbots, there's a good amount of variety. You can have like customer service chatbots. You can have chatbots for other purposes. We're focusing right now at looking at a very new, fancy, general purpose chatbot called ChatGPT. And just to understand what a chatbot is, this is just imagine you're having a text conversation like you would in an instant messenger, but you're having with a computer, and you can ask it to do things, ask it to come up with responses, and you just have a conversation with it. And when you're having a conversation with a computer using just regular English, that's referred to as natural language processing. So NLP, you'll just see that acronym from time to time as you're learning more about the different types of AI tools that are out there. You'll also see the term machine learning. Machine learning is just the mechanism for how these AI programs get trained. Basically, a tool like ChatGPT They take an incredible amount of data from all over the internet and from a lot of different sources, like such as a public domain. And they teach the computer to recognize patterns and to figure out kind of how language and concepts and different things relate to each other so that it can come up with these responses. Well, that sounds all very theoretical. So rather than me trying to explain it, let me just show you really quick what this might look like. So I'm going to switch over to another screen. So if you want to take a look at this later and try it out, what you need to do is go to openai.com. This is the tool that ChatGPT, this is OpenAI is a company that created ChatGPT. You'll just click on Learn About GPT-4, and you'll click on this button to try ChatGPT Plus. Right now, the ChatGPT tool is in an open research preview, so you don't have to pay anything to use it. There are some limits on how much you can use it, but you can right now just sign up for an account and start using it right away. There is currently no cost. It could very well be that by the time this webinar is published to YouTube, maybe that will change and maybe there will be a cost. And you can pay money to be able to use the tool more, get access when the servers get really busy, etc. So by way of example, so this is what it looks like when you actually get into it. This is a brand new feature. You may not see it in all accounts, but you could use the earlier version of ChatGPT that was available, that's been available for several months now, or you can use GPT-4, which is the one that was just released this week. It's very, very new. And it has some more capabilities in terms of what it can do. But just to give you an idea of what this is capable of, we could just type a question in here. So I'll come up with something a little bit silly. This is what people usually do, is they'll come up with something kind of silly the first time they use the tool. So something like, write me a Shakespearean soliloquy where the character is a small business owner that has just realized how much of a positive impact AI tools like GPT-4 are going to have on her ability to transform her business. Now you can see it starts typing out a response, and you can see it's actually writing it one word at a time. Something important to realize about how these tools work is it is actually coming up with it one word at a time. It's looking at the words that it's already created, and it's using its knowledge of how language is structured and how these concepts are structured to figure out what the next word is that it should write. And so in a way, it's almost like you can almost imagine that this tool is a bit like a high schooler that never actually read the book, but it has to stand up in front of class for a book report. And it's just kind of making things up as it goes along. So once you understand that, it's a little bit, it kind of helps you understand why it comes up with some of the answers it does, and why it responds the way it does sometimes. So this is pretty cool. I took something very random, something that probably doesn't exist anywhere on the internet, and it created something totally new, right? It created this very neat kind of Shakespearean soliloquy. But what's different about ChatGPT compared to previous attempts at creating this kind of interactive natural language tool is that it maintains the context of the conversation. So you can ask follow-up questions, and you can ask it about its responses. So for example, here, if I wanted to do something even sillier and say, rather than Shakespearean soliloquy, let's make it a dialogue in the style of a character from Dr. Seuss. And we'll see what happens. And so you can see I'm not going to sit here and watch the entire thing be created, but this just kind of gives you an idea of kind of what we're looking at. We're looking at a tool where you can ask questions and it'll give you responses. And these are generated by this machine learning program. So hopefully that kind of helps explain a bit about what the tool is. I do want to address the elephant in the room. I really want to approach this topic with empathy. What I'm going to show you and what we're going to talk about in the next 20 minutes or so is going to be a little bit hard to hear for a lot of you. And I went through the same experience. When I first saw what this tool is capable of, it created a little bit of an existential crisis for me. I was certain that there were certain jobs that were totally safe, at least for the next decade. And it really looks like this tool is really capable of doing about 90 to 95% of some of the things that I thought a machine learning program wouldn't be capable of doing yet. But it's really important to recognize that this is a tool. It is not going to entirely replace the need for humans and expertise and empathy and intuition. But the other thing to keep in mind is that everybody else is going to be using these tools. Your competitors are going to be using these tools. So it's important that you learn how to use them in order to make your business more successful and to give yourself a leg up on the competition. So I realize it may be kind of hard to witness this transition. It's hard to see a robot do something that I felt like I was really good at doing in a much shorter amount of time. But this is something that we have to kind of come to terms with. So I just wanted to start out with the empathy on that one. So here's some ideas of kind of some ways that you can use this tool. So rather than asking for a silly, poem or soliloquy, we can ask it to do things like, create ideas for taglines. I'll show you an example later about how you can use it to create, for example, a branding guide or a social media guide for your company. You can use it to create press releases. This I'm kind of leaning a little bit heavy on like the marketing and PR side of things, mostly because that's just where my mind has been lately. There's a lot of other types of use cases. You can use it for creating a proposal for like a partnership agreement. You can just ask it questions of things that you need to be thinking about and kind of need some help clarifying, like what are some questions I should be prepared to answer as a small business owner before meeting with the CPA for the first time, like these types of questions. Now, given the nature of this tool and of the way that AI works, I'm going to give you a few words of warning. First thing is this field is changing incredibly fast. Expect everything to change even by the end of the week. In fact, when I put together this presentation, GPT-4 hadn't been introduced yet. And I had to go back and make some edits just for that. And there's been, even new things coming in the last 1 to 2 days. Before you use any output of any kind of AI tools, just double check with the lawyer about intellectual property concerns. If you go to OpenAI's website, it does say that anything created using OpenAI, you can use and you can own, and you can use commercially. But it is a very dynamic and constantly changing field, and there's a lot of moving pieces that I am not qualified to provide any kind of advice on. So check with a lawyer before using it for something that you're going to be selling. I gave the analogy earlier about how this chatbot is a little bit like a high schooler sometimes making things up as it goes along, and it absolutely will create facts out of nowhere. And there's even in the research papers about this technology, you'll see stories about ChatGPT hallucinating facts and data. So never take facts provided by one of these tools and just put them out as truth. Always source your own facts and replace them with what you know to be true. Keep in mind that because a chatbot has to have a training library of data and articles, of books, of conversations to learn from, it's going to be biased based on that training data set. If if you can imagine that if its data set is coming from conversations from a tool that's used in very affluent countries, you can imagine that chatbot is now, or that AI is now going to have a bias towards the mindsets and kind of nuances of those cultures and of those people. There's absolutely stories from several years ago of companies trying to use AI for doing things like automatically screening candidates based on their resumes. And what ended up happening is they had candidates that were automatically rejected by this AI, and they couldn't figure out what was happening. And it turns out that it was looking at the name on the resume, and it said, well, based on all the people you've hired so far, if their name sounds like a white male, they're a lot more likely to be somebody that we would hire. So just be aware that these things have biases based on how they were trained. And as I mentioned, they're a tool. They're not a replacement for creativity, intuition, empathy, and expertise. One quick note on some ethics. These are not solved questions. These are things to think about. But if you have AI create something for you, what are the ethical considerations of claiming it as your own? What about if you ask AI to emulate somebody else's work? I just, a few minutes ago, asked an AI tool to create a work in the style of Dr. Seuss. Are there ethical, does that take away from that artist if I'm asking AI to emulate their style? And as a society, the training set that these tools are using is coming from the work that thousands of creative individuals have created, but now essentially is being used to give away this type of work for free. So how do we support those creative individuals? I don't have answers for these, but these are things to kind of be thinking about. One last thing, and then we'll get into kind of playing around with the tool and giving you some more specific examples. But make sure that when you're using tools like ChatGPT, think about how you can use them responsibly. A chatbot's not responsible for the vision or the voice of your company. You'll see some examples that I'll give where we're asking a chatbot to help out with a vision statement or with some content or with some branding. But what you'll find is because a chatbot has seen millions of examples of these things, the output it gives you is going to be a little bit cliche at times. It's going to be a little bit generic. It's not going to fit your dream and your vision of your company. It's not going to fit the heart of who you are and who your company is. And there's some things you could do to try and help guide it along, but remember that you are the one that owns this. So don't just take something from a chatbot and say this is now the way we're doing things. But what it is really helpful is it's helpful for brainstorming. It's helpful for organizing your thoughts. It's helpful for creating an outline of what you need to create, and then you can go back and replace and edit and put in your own wisdom and experience and expertise into whatever it has created. As I mentioned before, make sure you replace any facts or figures with your own. Don't trust anything that comes from a bot. Sometimes it'll be accurate, but more often than not, it is perfectly happy to make up facts or statements, but present them with a lot of confidence that makes you think that, well, it sounds believable. And of course, you still should be relying on humans for expertise. You should, even if this might get you 90% of the way there, you want to make sure that you're aware of the shortcomings of a tool like this. But taking these experts in branding or legal or accounting or whatever it is, make sure you're still relying on those humans and you're not just trying to rely solely on a tool for more than it should be used for. A really quick side note, there's a lot of different tools out there. ChatGPT is the one that has the headlines today. But you'll also see that Bing has its own chatbot, which, by the way, is powered by ChatGPT. Google has their Bard, which Kelly mentioned earlier. And there's a lot of other areas of AI tools. Image generation, Midjourney is a very exciting one. It's a little bit difficult to use, but it's really kind of incredible in terms of what it can do. There's a lot of platforms that are using AI. There's a lot of other use cases. So take a look around, do a lot of Googling. Don't bother trying to like screenshot this slide or search these. There is a lot of you can get a lot more information just from Googling these. So one last, just a couple of quick tips before I go into a really quick demo. How much you get out of the tool is entirely dependent on how you build that prompt. So the questions that I was asking of the chatbot, such as, create me a soliloquy, that is the prompt. That's the question that you're asking or the conversation you're having with the chatbot. So some things that really help first is ask the chatbot to role play. If you want it to act as a certain type of individual, tell it that. Say, pretend you're a marketing consultant and build me something. Or you're the owner of a company and the company needs to do this. Tell me how you would do something else. Provide as much context as you can. The more context you give the tool, the better its response will be. And don't be shy about giving it a lot of context. The newest version of ChatGPT that uses GPT-4 can have up to about 25,000 words of context that it can keep in its mind and utilize in future conversations. So tell it more about the business, about your business and how you want it, what your business represents. Maybe give it an example of maybe some content that you've created and ask it to use that, for context for future responses. The more context you can add, the better the results you will get. Especially if you're using it for creating content, tell it how you want it to respond. Tell it what kind of a voice you want to have. The kind of the keywords that work really well here is to ask it to provide a particular style, voice, and tone. Voice is, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, voice is what you say, tone is how you say it. So, for example, you could say that the voice is personal and enthusiastic, the tone is positive and optimistic. Or you can have it look at existing text, existing marketing materials or content that you created and ask it to evaluate the style, voice, and tone and tell you what it is so you can use that in future prompts. Don't be afraid to ask the tool for help. So here's this first one I think is something that's incredibly powerful. Say if you ask it a question, I found it's incredibly helpful to say, before answering me, I want you to ask me some more questions in order to get help you get more detail. And it will creatively come up with new questions to ask that will provide context that you might not have thought of that will help it build a better response. And here's an example. This bottom example is basically how I created the bio that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. I asked ChatGPT almost exactly this quote. I said, write a short professional bio about me, highlighting my expertise in AI chatbots. Now, rather than me trying to give it a bunch of information, I said, interview me to gather details for the bio, asking one question at a time. And that's exactly what it did. It asked me a bunch of questions, it interviewed me, and after it felt like it had enough information, it generated a bio. And the follow-up is really important. Remember, this bot has the context of the conversation and understands what has already been said and what's already transpired. So feel free to ask it to tweak things. Say, can you please make the tone a bit more playful? Include this section. Provide more details in this part. So I'm just going to walk you through an example of what this might look like. I'll show you one way that I've used it. And then we'll have some time for some questions, I believe. There it is. All right, so we're back here where we can see the ChatGPT. I'm going to switch over to this other tab. So this is a conversation that I had with ChatGPT this week, where and this is highlighting one of our members of Kernville Cowork, the Whispering Pines Lodge. And so Ryan Emsley of the Whispering Pines Lodge and we sat down and we asked ChatGPT to come up with some helpful content for us. So I said, I would like for you to pretend you're a high-end PR and marketing consultant. I want you to help me build a branding guide for my business, the Whispering Pines Lodge. Please interview me to gather information for building the brand guide. Please only ask me one question at a time and let me know when you have enough information to build a comprehensive brand guide. And so you can see here, it said its first question was, what is the mission and vision of Whispering Pines Lodge? Very helpful question if you're trying to build a brand guide. But I wanted to test a little bit. So I asked if it could help me build a mission and vision statement. This is something I noticed if you ask it to interview you, it'll typically come up with a whole block of questions that it's impossible to answer at one time. So if you're specific and you ask it to ask one question at a time, it tends to follow those instructions. Of course, let's start with the first question. What are the core values that you want to embody at Whispering Pines Lodge? And so I said, I wanted to, again, kind of test it out, see what it could do. So, well, can you give me examples of values for a boutique lodge in a small mountain town? And I want you to notice how I added little bits of context there to really help it get something that's not so generic and cliche, but something that's a little bit more specific to a boutique lodge or a lodge in a small mountain town. So it came up with a lot of really good examples. And so what we should have done is gone back and spent some time kind of absorbing these, kind of figuring out like how this fits with our vision and kind of building our own mission and vision statement. I would not encourage you to use ChatGPT for just telling you what your mission and vision statement is. That's something that has to come from you. But for the sake of the example, I said, yeah, let's use all of them. And you can see here, I'm not going to have you read the whole thing. And I know it's probably hard to read as I'm scrolling really quickly through this. But the summary is I basically, it kept interviewing me. It kept asking me questions about the target audience, about the logo, about anything else. And it came up with an okay brand guide. I've seen it create a lot better examples. This one was a little bit, it kind of felt like it was phoning it in a little bit. But remember, you can ask follow-up questions and you can have it continue to improve. So the first thing I like to ask is if I don't feel like the answer's high enough quality, I'll say, well, what else would be good to include in this? What other sections would be good to include? And it has some really good examples, a brand story, information on how to use the logo, photography style. And so I said, let's add the first 6 suggestions. Just because it takes so long to generate these questions, it's helpful if you ask it to give smaller amounts of feedback at a time. Don't ask it to write a whole novel. First of all, it won't. It'll only write a little over 4,000 words at a time, but just something to kind of keep in mind. And so you can see here, it did a pretty good job of filling this out. Now, again, this is very generic. This is going to work for a lot of businesses. It does not know the nuances of how your business works, about who you are, about what drives you. So your job is then to come back through and say, oh, well, for my business, for my brand voice and tone, what is my personality? Are these attributes? Do these make sense? Let me kind of rewrite this. So what I encourage people to do is to use this as an outline and go in and just replace everything to make sure that it actually captures who you are, who your business is. But it saves so much time because I would not even think of some of these categories. And sometimes that blank page syndrome of just sitting there staring at a blank page with a cursor blinking makes it really hard to get started. And this gives you a fantastic start. And just to kind of give you an example, now one final example, after it's created the whole brand guide, now we're at the end of the conversation. it now understands your brand. And so you can ask it additional questions and it has that context in place. So let's see if this will work. Let's have it create a welcome email to send to guests at the Whispering Pines Lodge the day before their stay, welcoming their arrival and telling them more about what they can expect during their stay. Now, keep in mind, I haven't told the ChatGPT anything about what they can expect during their stay. So you will see it kind of creatively come up with ideas of what this guest's experience could be like. But again, go through, edit it, update it, but it gives you a really nice template to start with. So you can see here, it kind of, I'm not gonna have you sit here and watch it write out the entire email. GPT-4 is slower than the old model, so it's going to take a while for this to finish writing. But I did want to wrap things up with. We'll get back to our slides here. This final little exit slide saying, come join us at Kernville Cowork. It's a fantastic spot to come and work where you play. What you're seeing, this image on the right, is I was up actually quite late last night asking an AI to help me build some artwork to really exemplify kind of the feeling of being sitting at a desk or sitting at your computer and just feeling the wild coming from this need to kind of get outdoors and get back into nature. And so that's what we hope to provide here at Kernville Cowork, is the ability to get work done, but then have that really great work-life balance so you can step out and go across the street to the river or go up into the mountains. So hopefully that was helpful. I'll let Kelly come back in, and I believe we've got some questions I can see in the chat already.
Yeah, why don't you start with the first chat question and work your way down?
Sure. Does OpenAI currently list the source of the text or data they publish? So all of these privately held companies that are training models, they are a bit cagey about the sources of their information. They do make it clear that the training data set only goes up to a certain point in 2021, so their responses won't include any. The bot doesn't have any knowledge of like current events. And you can certainly do some digging to try and get a little bit more information, but generally speaking, a lot of it is public domain works and stuff that a web scraper like Google could have access to, or Bing in this case. Who at OpenAI has access to monitor what is being asked by the user? This is one of the trade-offs of using something that is in what they call a free research preview. They want to see how the tool is being used, how it works, if the safeguards they put in place are working effectively. So you do give their QA team and their data scientists permission to view your prompts and view the the responses. It's not public information, but assume that anybody at OpenAI would have access to this. Who started and owns OpenAI? Actually, Kelly, do you have a good answer on this? Because you were looking this up earlier, I believe.
I know Microsoft owns a good chunk of it, but I believe it was a startup and then Microsoft bought into it. I don't know the other partners.
Okay, yeah, and that sounds about right. This, there's there's probably a number of investors in this company. The thumbs up and thumbs down icons, that's just for their research team. So if you thumbs up, it lets them know that you got a particularly good response. And a thumbs down is a way of you saying that either was inaccurate or maybe it was harmful, because they try and put a lot of work into making sure ChatGPT will not respond with any harmful information. Jennifer asks, did you say OpenAI generates drawings, album covers, brochures? No, it does not produce images. The latest version of ChatGPT using the GPT-4 model can use images as input, but for generating any kind of images, there's other tools out there. OpenAI does have a tool called DALL-E, D-A-L-L-E. But there's other tools. I've found that Midjourney creates some really fantastic results. But again, do your research, make sure with any company you use, figure out the usage rights you have on those. And finally, Garrett asked, does ChatGPT have telephone or voice capability? Not to the best of my knowledge at this point, but as they're integrating with Bing and some other tools, I expect that that's going to come pretty soon. And there's other tools. Amazon's working on their own tool that's going to use Alexa, I'm sure. Google Bard, I'm sure, will be integrated into Google Home. But right now, it does not have any tools like that. What are your thoughts on AI as a tool in the healthcare industry, particularly when it comes to HIPAA? That's a really good question. And I suspect that a general use tool like ChatGPT isn't going to be very helpful. And I suspect that you're always going to need the expertise of doctors. But there are experiments with using AI for taking all of the data that you have about a patient and all the symptoms and everything that you're seeing and witnessing and tests and everything else, and using AI as a tool to suggest potential causes, courses of action, etc. You're not going to be able to use a general purpose tool though because of HIPAA and other reasons. But there are some very specialized tools that are using a very similar technology that are being tested right now. I think we've gotten to that. Well, I'm at the bottom of the chat and I don't see anything in Q&A.
That is it for the questions. Last chance to get a question in. Let's hit the rest of the chat box and see what Maureen has added to it. A little bit on storm relief through FEMA, which is probably going to tell you that it's closed. Information right there where you can grab onto for the Kern County Micro Grant Program, the Bakersfield Women's Business Conference on April the 27th. The address for OpenAI where you can jump in. And I did jump in, Justin, and have been playing with it a little bit the last couple of days. My first task was to do something as far as a weighted average cost of capital, where I put in 3 different loans with different rates. They amortize differently. And it might have been my phrase I put in, but I wasn't happy with the answer. So I think I needed to work a little bit more with the question that I asked and then compare it to my calculator for what I came up with the APR on some of those deals.
And that's something to keep in mind. These tools are built primarily for speaking natural language. And so very specialized types of inputs, outputs like math, they're not super good at. GPT-4 is much better than the previous version. But what you'll see is you'll very often have it spit you back an answer that it is confident about that is incredibly wrong.
Oh, it was
and it will actually, and GPT-4 is supposed to be better at letting you know if it doesn't quite know how to get to the answer. So a better approach often is to ask it to explain how to get to the answer. If I have these numbers, how would I calculate the APR or whatever it is? That might be a little bit better, but it is not a good tool for straight up doing your math homework.
2 more questions you got in there if you want to grab them.
Can AI speak Ebonics? I don't know. It can actually speak a lot of languages, and that's mostly the fact that it's pulled so much information from so many different places. So when it comes to dialects, languages, everything like that, it's actually it's a bit surprising. I would play around with it if you want to know what it can do. And then the last question is help with personal tax. That kind of goes back to the question about math. Even if you ask it to provide its work, it will very confidently give you its work and how it has arrived at the solution. But what it's doing is it's writing one word at a time, and it's writing the next word based on what it's already written. And so it is trying to come up with an answer that you as a human will believe. That is what it is designed to do, and that's what that's how it was trained. So when it comes to things like personal taxes, stuff like that, anything that's very financial, it will give you a very confident answer, but it's probably not going to be something that you're going to want to use. Similarly, compared with the previous version of ChatGPT, the one that's been in use for several months now, the previous version, when they asked it to take the uniform bar exam, scored in the 10th percentile. This new version scored in the 90th percentile. So you could see that it's excelling in a lot of different areas like law, but again, don't trust it when it comes to things that are factual, that require that level of expertise. And I see one more question from Alevtina. How to ask for help with resume? I would actually, depending on what your goals are, a couple ideas that I would come up with is either one, take the same approach that I did with the personal bio, and ask for it to interview you. Say, I want you to act as a resume consultant. I want you to interview me one question at a time to get information about my experience. And then I want you to create a resume for me. And it'll be plain text. You'll have to, put it into, a different doc to format it. Or you can give it an existing resume and you can ask it to make updates or to make it more concise or to make, change the tone or whatever to be more powerful or more impressive. Please don't ask it to make up work history for you, though. That's not ethical.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw my 2 cents in. I read a nice article in the last week on this where employers were checking to see if they had used ChatGPT, and they were able to identify, similar resumes, similar content, similar experiences. So what you had mentioned earlier about taking it and then using it as a starting point, I think is an important point in that.
Mm-hmm.
And a business plan, I'm going to steal your next question. You can add to what I'm going to say, but I think for a business plan, there are better options like with live plans. So contact your SBDC.
I like that answer. And again, with anything like that, especially a business plan, it is so incredibly dependent on who you are, on who your business is, why you got it started in the first place. There's a lot to consider. It is really helpful for asking questions, though. Say, I'm building a business plan and I just don't understand the competitive analysis part of it. Can you, what questions would you ask if you were trying to create this, or what information should I look at? I did ask ChatGPT today to create a competitive analysis for a co-working space in such and such town. And it gave me a competitive analysis of competitors that didn't exist, with features that nobody had, with prices that and offerings that nobody had. So just be careful, but use it as a starting point. Use it as a tool. But there are always more specialized tools out there. So it's a very it's a Swiss Army knife, but sometimes you need the right tool for the job.
And remember also, we're at the very, very, very beginning phase of this, the very, very beginning point. The improvements in the technology is going to be phenomenal as we go over time. Okay, well, Justin Powers, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Appreciate learning more on this topic. What a timely topic. Boy, it's everywhere right now. Great to have you here, and look forward to you coming back again someday. And you've made me want to come up and visit not only you, but that Whispering Pines Lodge. Boy, that sounds like a fantastic place to spend a night.
Oh, they are fantastic. We've got a deal right now where you can get a stay at the Whispering Pines Lodge, as well as day passes, discounted day passes at Kernville Cowork. So it's a great way to take that 2 to 3 day vacation you've been thinking about, but maybe turn into 10 days or 20 days. Maybe come up a few days earlier and get those meetings done in Kernville, so you can just jump out and go play in the river, which is going to be fantastic this year, by the way. The river is going to be amazing this summer.
Okay, well, I'm down, and I will say in front of all of our participants and our panelists that I am coming up there and staying at the Whispering Pines. So you have me sold. I can't wait.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Kelly.
Well, that wraps it up. That wraps up webinar number 268. We'll be back next week talking about disaster, everything disaster related. Until next week, for Justin Powers, I am Kelly Bearden. Thank you so much, and everybody have a great week. Bye-bye, everybody.